Born a secret but no longer a secret, Frampton's gripping childhood memoir.
Single mothers sent here to have their babies in secret, calls for the government to issue a formal apology.
These women, they shouldn't feel the shame and blame, nor should their children feel the shame and blame. It really lies with the establishment, with the religious institutions, which so pressured these women.
Good evening. We'll be live at Westminster to hear why pressure for an apology is growing. The government is being asked to apologise for the hardship suffered by unmarried mothers in charitable institutions during the middle of the last century.
Mothers and children went to the Houses of Parliament today, led by a man who was born at one of the homes in Cornwall. Well, our political editor Martin Oates joins us now from Westminster.
Well, 3 months ago, Spotlight carried the moving story of Phil Frampton, who was born at a home for unmarried mothers near St Agnes. And he was just one of 1,200 children born at Rosemundy House, run by something called the Cornwall Social and Moral Welfare Association. In his case, his mother had come down to Cornwall from Birmingham to have him secretly and then left him to be taken into care, although quite possibly because effectively she didn't have any choice in the matter. Now, he's since done quite a lot of research into the kind of experience she and other young women might have had, and he's shocked at what he's uncovered.
They were humiliated, they were forced to do hard labour, they were marched to church every Sunday, at one stage in green tunics, told they should repent. They were left without any heating, forced to go and chop firewood and collect wood, kinder wood in the Cornish damp woodland. It was just pretty horrendous.
Well, Mr Frampton led the delegation to Westminster today with the support of his local MP in Manchester, who's laid down a parliamentary motion.
Vile abuse of children at his own and other orphanages was reported to the British government's Home Office, but covered up. The fight for justice began.
The whips, the Tory whips, the Labour whips, the Liberal whips, some of them have even said that they covered up abuse to protect MPs in return for votes. The Home Office has not replied to the allegations that they funded the paedophile information exchange. We'd like to know why that was the case. There are many people who can be brought to the dock on this.
7:10, you're watching Breakfast. Let's take you back to one of our main stories here this morning, and that's the resignation of Dame Lowell Goddard, who's the latest in the long line of setbacks for the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse.
Yeah, in her statement, the New Zealand judge said the inquiry legacy of failure had been very hard to shake off. The first chair, Baroness Butler Sloss, was appointed in July 2014, but she stood down a week later.
Dame Fiona Woolf succeeded her the following September, but resigned less than 2 months later. They'd both been criticised for being too close to the establishment.
Well, finally, Justice Lowell Goddard took over the role in February of 2015, but she resigned yesterday.
Well, joining us in the studio is Phil Frampton from the organisation White Flowers, which represents several survivors groups, also a survivor himself of abuse. Morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning.
It's been such a long process already. What do you think about this latest resignation?
It's regrettable, but it is a chance to put the inquiry back on track. I'm quite shocked in some ways, but I wonder if this would have happened a month ago, whether Theresa May would be Prime Minister today, because it was a major blunder, in my view, to appoint Justice Goddard in the first place. She was not a choice of survivors. We were presented with Goddard as a take it or leave it. We had been told previously that we would be consulted over the appointment, and most survivors, well, not most, but many survivors were in favour of Michael Mansfield QC. Right. We wanted someone who was capable of challenging the establishment, because this is what brought about the inquiry in the first place. Remember, there are now 4 million, according to the government, 4 million survivors of abuse and child abuse in this country alone. And that's been allowed to go on, and there's been inquiry after inquiry. I was involved with many people involved in the Waterhouse inquiry, and that was almost 20 years ago now. And still the establishment has failed to clean up its own act. I was born here in 1953. My mother came down from Birmingham to have me in secret here and then went back to Birmingham to continue her life. So I was left here and put into care.
Phil Frampton was one of 1,200 babies born at Rosemundy House in St Agnes between the 1920s and the 1960s when it closed.
I was mixed race, and the Moral Welfare Society said there was no chance of adopting or fostering a mixed race, coloured, black child in the West Country. Many people really don't know about this experience. I didn't know about this experience, about the way that young women were treated in this country, in England, even just 50 years ago. And some of the stories are absolutely harrowing.
I was born in 1953 to a Nigerian father and an English mother. In the 1950s, raising a mixed-race child was thought to be problematic. So my mother put me up for adoption. But as this report shows, my chances of finding a family were slim.
Full name of candidate, Frampton Philip Roy. General health, good. Ever had fits or subject to fits? No. Had measles? No. Scarlet fever? No. Whooping cough? No. Any other physical defects or maladies? Half caste.
With no prospect for adoption, I was put into an orphanage. This is where I ended up. Now it's an old people's home. It wasn't idyllic. I know children who were sexually abused. I never was, but I was sometimes humiliated and beaten and forced to eat rotten food until I was sick. It might shock many, but compared to today, I believe I was fortunate.
What this place here gave us was stability. And out of stability comes so much more. It meant that we stayed in the same schools so that education wasn't disrupted. It meant that we learned to care for each other, to respect each other, even to love one another. Families were catered for so that brothers and sisters didn't have to be split up.
This institution gave us the basis for a start in life. I went on to university, and most of my friends from the home got reasonable jobs. How very, very different to today.
Phil and his other black orphanage companions, being almost the only non-whites in the town, often faced vile racial abuse from adults, but made friends with the local children.
And so you then spent your childhood in care homes and never met your mother?
No, at 14 I was told that my mother had died the previous year. I never met my father either.
Phil's black Nigerian father was kicked out of the country for dating Phil's mother. He boarded the liner Apapa and never returned.
Just had to get on with life, you know. In many ways I've been lucky.
Published in 2004, The Golly in the Cupboard, Phil's explosive, award-winning memoir, was greeted with great acclaim. At the time, it was described as a turning point in the emergence of black British writing, comparable with James Baldwin's Going to Meet the Man. This revised third edition adds fascinating new insights into the impact, especially on his mother, of the casual brutality and discrimination during the post-war era. It is now available in paperback and, for the first time, on Kindle. It's a must-read. Order for you and your friends now.